We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, and welcome to the Congressional District 2 Candidates Forum, sponsored by the League of Women Voters. My name is Lisa Scott. I represent the League of Women Voters, and I will serve as your moderator this evening. The purpose of the League of Women Voters is to promote political responsibility through informed and active participation of citizens in government. The League is nonpartisan and does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. Throughout its history, the League has provided opportunities for candidates seeking public office to take their case directly to the voters. We hope that you find this forum informative. Candidates and our timer for the evening, please turn your cameras on now. And as we're doing that, I'm going to summarize the procedures for a virtual candidate forum that all three candidates have agreed to. The order of speaking will be alphabetical, the same order for opening and closing statements. Each candidate will be allowed 3 minutes for an opening statement. After all candidates have spoken, the moderator will open the meeting with questions. Those asked tonight have been submitted by the public and reviewed by a League committee in advance to avoid redundancy. Each candidate will be given 1.5 minutes to answer each question, and at the moderator's discretion, the time for a response may be reduced, but it's always going to be the same for everyone. There are no rebuttals this evening. We will attempt to rotate the order of speaking, so each candidate has an opportunity to be the first to answer a question. I would encourage the candidates to police me and tell me if I've skipped the order. This is still very much a League group effort. A League member is acting as timekeeper. The timekeeper is holding up signs when a candidate has 30 seconds remaining and when they are to stop speaking. I will allow you to continue for a few seconds to finish your thought. Please don't continue beyond that. If you do, I will start speaking as well, and it's important that you finish each question's response in a firm and instructive way to the people watching. You'll also have 2 minutes for a closing statement, and we'll speak in the same order as the opening statement. And in accordance with League policy, audio and video recording by authorized members of the media are permitted only if agreed to by all of the candidates present. The League maintains the right to record the forum and publish it on League-controlled electronic pages. No other recordings will be allowed, and no partial transcript or recording may be published without written permission from the League. And at this point, following the alphabetical order, I'd like our first candidate, Mr. Berger, to unmute yourself and do your opening statement, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi there. First, I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for inviting me to speak tonight, the other candidates for sharing the stage, and everyone watching for taking the time to join us. I'm Harry R. Berger, and I'm the Green Party candidate for Congress in New York's 2nd Congressional District. I believe the people deserve a representative in government who truly represents their interests, and the only way that is possible is when they accept $0 from corporate sources. Don't be fooled by other candidates sending out a flood of expensive campaign mail paid for by their state party, touting they take no corporate PAC money. Corporate PACs are just one string that the corporations use to pull on their puppets. They fund the state and national campaign committees for both Democrats and Republicans, and their party leadership is beholden to the corporate interest. So anyone who depends on them for campaign support is still a puppet of a puppet controlled by the 1%. I make it clear at every opportunity mine is a 100% people-powered campaign. The Green Party refuses all corporate funding from top to bottom, no ands, ifs, or buts. The big two parties also love to run ads gaslighting the people into thinking you only have two choices. The Green Party is on row E of your ballot, and because the Democratic Party is afraid of any opposition but the Republicans, we very much need your votes for Howie Hawkins for president in order to keep our party on the ballot in the future. The American people deserve truly universal health care. Out of over 50 nations the UN considers highly developed, we're the only one that lets people become billionaires by medical extortion. It's literally your money or your life. Who benefits from that system? It's not you, and it's not me. Big insurance, big pharma, and your employers who want you to be dependent on them to afford good health insurance. The CEO of United Healthcare took home over $66 million last year. That's more than $250,000 every day. I don't know about you, but I've never made that much in a whole year. I lost my spot, darn it. They get rich, then they use bribery with extra steps to make it technically not illegal to put lots of money into campaigns for incumbent politicians who support the status quo and challengers to those who would threaten their fortunes. Military manufacturers do the same thing until we're spending more on war than the next 10 nations combined. You can always count on me to oppose America bullying other countries that aren't attacking their neighbors or massacring their own people. As someone on the autistic spectrum who only got diagnosed in the last few years, I spent my whole youth being bullied for being different. I can't stand to see my country being the bully now. Humanity also desperately needs a real Green New Deal to have any chance of long-term survival. It's been a record-breaking year of hurricanes. We got our worst hit since Sandy. The West Coast has literal tornadoes of fire like something out of the 10 Commandments movie. The Green Party has been beating the drum on this for the last 10 years. We need an aggressive plan to bring us to near zero greenhouse emissions by 2030.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berger. Our next speaker, Mr. Garbarino.
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this tonight. Also, I really appreciate the work that you've done in Albany. I've enjoyed working with the League over the past couple of years as a member of the state legislature. I also want to thank the two other candidates for participating tonight. This might be our only debate. I've been a member of the state assembly for the last 8 years. I'm Andrew Garbarino, and I'm running for Congress in New York's 2nd Congressional District. But I'm not just a state assemblyman. I'm a small business owner on Main Street in Sayville. I'm third generation Long Islander. I grew up here in Sayville. I went to school here. I worked at the local hardware store. I went to the local church. I'm a part of the local Rotary Club. I know what's important to Long Island families. I know what's important to Long Islanders. I've been fighting for those issues for 8 years in Albany, whether it be public safety, lower taxes, infrastructure, clean environment, expanded healthcare. These issues and more, I have a voting record of supporting over 8 years, and I look forward to continue supporting them when I'm in Congress. People might say, as a member of the state assembly and the Republicans, how could you do anything? You're in the extreme minority. Well, I've learned a lot of things over the last 8 years, and one of them is working across the aisle. I've been able to produce for my district on many different occasions, whether it be local bills for my constituents, bringing money back home for special projects, or just helping people with constituent service. I've had to do this by reaching across the aisle and working with Democrats, similar to what Peter King has done in Congress. I look forward to following the footsteps of Peter King. I enjoy and I'm thrilled to have his endorsement in this race, and I look forward to continuing to fight for Long Island when I'm in Congress representing the constituents of the New York 2nd Congressional District.
Thank you very much. Ms. Gordon. Unmute yourself. Okay.
Good evening. Thank you so much, League of Women Voters, for putting this together. My candidate colleagues, I am honored to be in this forum with you. My name is Jackie Gordon. I'm running for Congress in the New York 2nd Congressional District. I am a combat veteran, a retired school counselor, a public servant, a single mom, and an immigrant. I'm running for Congress for the same reason I joined the Army. When I was 20 years old, there was an Army commercial that said, "We do more before 9 a.m. than most people do all day." When I saw that commercial, I was sold. I knew right then and there that's who I wanted to be. I wanted to do more. And we need more from Washington. Washington isn't working for us. We need representatives who are going to fight for affordable health care. That means bringing down the cost of prescription drugs and making sure that we have protections for pre-existing conditions. I've been in this race since last May. And talking to voters in the district, I met a woman and her daughter, and they were cancer survivors. And she told me that she wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for the Affordable Care Act. And now she has pre-existing conditions. I have to fight for her. Here in Long Island, we have the largest concentration of veterans. And so we have to serve them just as they've served us. I remember coming home from deployments, how hard it is to adjust to life as you once knew it. And so we have to make sure that veterans have the mental health resources that they need, that they don't become homeless, and that we make sure that the VA healthcare system remains intact. Climate change is also important. On my last deployment from Afghanistan in 2012, 2 weeks later, Superstorm Sandy hit. So here in this district, we know that climate change is real. And so what we need are representatives in Congress who will prioritize climate change. And that means they will work together to bring the resources that we need to work towards renewable energy. I am ready to do that. My opponent is beholden to big corporate interests and insurance corporations, but the only persons that I am interested in protecting and working for are the voters in this district. And I look forward to being your representatives. And I look forward to this robust conversation that we'll have this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much. At this point, we'll commence with the questions. They're on a variety of subjects. I'll sort of bounce around a little bit, trying to cover in what really is a very short period of time, topics that are of interest to the voters in the 2nd Congressional District. And I hope our candidates will agree to stay on an extra 10 minutes or so if needs be, so we can do a wide range of questions. So the first of our questions, we'll start with Mr. Garbarino, because that's our round robin. And here's the question. What would you do if elected to help the New York State economy?
Well, thank you very much for that question. And before I get to it, I just want to address something my opponent said about being beholden to insurance and the insurance business. If you look at what they're accusing me of, people I'm taking money from, they're small businesses on Main Street, whether it's Folks Insurance Group, Edwards and Company, Mike Peaslake Insurance Company. While I'm being supported by small businesses on Main Street, my opponent's being supported by people who support defunding the police. So if I have to choose between people who are supporting defunding the police or small businesses on Main Street, I'll choose Main Street every time. But as for the economy, I've worked for the last 8 years in Albany to make sure that small businesses were protected, that they had tax breaks, that they had the funding that they needed to succeed. That's why I've been endorsed by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for Congress. One big thing that we need to do, especially on Long Island, is an infrastructure bill. Small businesses can't grow because we don't have the proper infrastructure on Long Island. There's been talk for years about doing an infrastructure bill, whether it's roads, clean water, sewers. Right now, small businesses want to grow. They don't have the ability to do so. They don't have the water flow. They don't have the funding. So making sure that the federal government can invest in infrastructure so small businesses can grow, they can get bigger, they can hire more employees and pay their employees more. That's something that I'm definitely going to focus on when I'm in Congress.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Gordon, same question.
Just to clarify, I do not support defunding the police. I was in the military for 29 years. 27 of those were, I was a military police officer, law enforcement. Going to answer the question about economy, I think what we can do really to grow the economy here on Long Island is to invest in creating a medical supply chain. Right here on Long Island, we could create our own PPE in the US, starting even in high school. As a high school guidance counselor in a vocational high school, I know that we can develop these resources right here on Long Island. We were an industrial mecca here on Long Island, so we already have the infrastructure. And so I'm talking about creating PPE gowns, all the way to the vaccine production and manufacturing right here on Long Island. It would grow our economy, it would create good jobs, and it would be US right here on Long Island, and it would help our economy.
Thank you. Mr. Berger. Unmute, please.
Since the other two addressed policing, you have a former cop and one who's endorsed by the PBA or the police unions and everything. The bottom line is that the system we have for policing right now is broken. We send a person with a gun to situations that they're not trained for, when really we should have fewer police and more mental health counselors to go and assist people who are in distress. So that is where we're coming at with defunding the police. It's not erasing the police. It's not having no police. It's having them do what they're better trained for, and then having other people do things that they're trained for and responding more appropriately to different situations. As far as boosting the economy goes, the Green Party's plan is for the eco-socialist Green New Deal. The idea is that we need to make aggressive efforts to get our greenhouse gas emissions to zero within 10 years. Because if we don't, we're going to wind up with more stronger hurricanes getting further north and more damage. So we want to build out green energy infrastructure and also energy efficiency projects like high-speed rail lines and things of that nature, so that we can use less energy and generate it cleanly. That'll be able to put every American who wants a job to work.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Gordon, this one starts with you. Do you support changes to our tax structure? Explain.
I absolutely do. Over the last 17 months that I've been talking to folks here on Long Island, we are burdened by the state and local tax cap, which is a result of our current GOP tax plan. And what happened is that 83% of tax cuts went to rich and wealthy corporations. So we need to reverse that. And we need to make sure that middle-class Americans get the support that they need. And one of my first priorities when I get to Washington is to work with Democrats and Republicans alike to work on repealing the state and local tax cap so that families here on Long Island can get relief.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Berger?
So one of my favorite ideas on this subject is creating a maximum wage disparity law. So what you would do is you would compute the 15th percentile of paid full-time employees and multiply that by a factor like, say, 25. And if any person makes more money than that off the corporation in any way, the excess would be taxed at something like 85%. So this way, if you have a worker-owned cooperative where the employees all own part of the company and they gain from the dividends and they get a voice in the leadership of the company, you can have everyone making more money and able to afford to do what they want to do. It'll make a more just and equitable society, instead of having, you know, a whole bunch of people working 29 hours a week so they don't get health insurance, or being as a independent contractor so that they don't count. No, everybody who works, everybody who labors for the benefit of the company, they count in this computation. And that way we will have fewer billionaire CEOs and more people who can afford to live their life productively.
Thank you. Mr. Garbarino?
Thank you. I appreciate the question. And I actually have a voting record on this, as does my opponent. Every time a tax increase has come in front of the state assembly that was for Long Island, I voted against it. Every time a tax increase has gone in front of my opponent on the Babylon Town Board, she voted for it. So I think, you know, the proof is in the pudding. We have already proven voting records on how we're going to handle taxation issues for Long Islanders. As for the tax code, we have to get back down. We have to do a full restoration of the SALT tax deduction. That was passed out of Washington. I know Congressman King, Congressman Swazi have fought to get it, the SALT tax deduction back. We need it back. Right now the limit on $10,000 is too little. Most people in this district, their real property taxes are more than $10,000. So it's really hurting everyday blue collar workers, middle class workers, middle class families. So the restoration of the SALT tax deduction is going to be my number one priority when I get to Washington.
Okay, thank you. The next question, Mr. Berger, you would take first. In Congress right now and in negotiations with the president, the most recent iteration or proposal of the CARES Act is going nowhere. What do you think the equivalent of a CARES Act should be, should you be elected to Congress? What would be your priorities to include in it for the federal government to be helping New York State?
I'm sorry, which one is the CARES Act again? I'm not sure which acronyms.
COVID-19 aid to the states and individuals. and
Okay.
businesses.
So what Canada has done is they have given everybody $2,000 a month for the whole duration of the COVID crisis, plus I believe 3 months or something on that scale. And really, if we fund the people at the bottom, they will spend it, and that will keep the economy circulating. People will be able to pay their rents, so landlords will be able to pay their mortgages, or homeowners will be able to pay their mortgages, and we won't have this problem with evictions and all that other stuff. If you do that, most of the other problems pretty much take care of themselves, because people will be able to get by on that. Or if they're used to living on more than that, they probably have some savings that they can draw on.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Garbarino.
Yes, thank you very much. I've been working a lot with the state currently as a member of the state assembly, dealing with building the economy back up. And I have publicly called for the federal government to come in and provide money, not just to small businesses, but also to local governments. I don't think we should get a blank check for New York State. I know they're asking for $55 billion. The state was already $8 billion in the hole before COVID happened. But small local localities, whether it's the county of Suffolk, county of Nassau, town of Islip, town of Babylon, they lost money through no fault of their own. The economy was shut down. They make most of their money on sales tax. Teachers, firemen, cops, municipal workers, they shouldn't be laid off because of this pandemic. What the federal government should do is similar to what they've done with natural disasters, similar to what they did after Sandy. They came in, FEMA worked with the localities and said, okay, town of Islip, where do you need this money? Where can it do the most good? And they did it. Suffolk County, where do you need this money? Where can it do the most good? And it worked out. We do that in California with wildfires. We do it in Louisiana, North Carolina, South Carolina with hurricanes. This pandemic should be treated like a natural disaster. Long Island and New York was the epicenter. The focus should be here, other than making it even all over the country.
Thank you. Ms. Gordon.
I'd just like to go back to the last question with Mr. Garbarino. While I spent time on the town board, we delivered services to residents, and that's why good quality service, and that's why I was reelected 5 times. What Mr. Garbarino did with tax dollars was take luxury trips with his insurance donors. That's what he did with tax dollars. In reference to the COVID relief packages, it is government's responsibility to aid its citizens in time of crisis. And so I think that legislators need to sit at the table and produce a package of relief for residents. That means extending individual relief for families, extending the unemployment benefits, and PPP for small businesses so that we can get our economy back on track.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Garbarino, next one starts with you. What's your position on the Affordable Health Care Act?
Well, I think there's certain good parts about the Affordable Health Care Act. I think that there's some things that can be redone. For one instance, with the passage of Affordable Health Care Act, the Affordable Care Act, the New York State had a great health plan called Family Health Plus. It was something that was run by the state, similar to Child Health Plus. It was something that a lot of people really enjoyed. They had great coverage. Under the rules of the ACA, Family Health Plus could no longer exist. So a lot of people lost that coverage and ended up having to go on to Medicaid, which was not as great of coverage. As for other parts, I fully support pre-existing conditions, covering pre-existing conditions, as I have a voting record of 8 years being on the Health Committee and the Insurance Committee. And I can supply you, it's 33 pages of bills, hundreds of bills that I've supported, not only to expand the coverage for pre-existing conditions, but also to lower the age for people who need screenings for breast cancer or colon cancer. I've also fought for people to get rid of surprise billing. I have a very good pro-health record. I have been attacked for voting against pre-existing conditions. What I voted against in the bill they're referencing, were the bills they were referencing, were the budget bills that included cuts to Medicaid, cuts to hospitals, and bail reform. So I'd vote against that bill again, but I support anybody with pre-existing conditions.
Thank you. Ms. Gordon?
And the one thing Mr. Garbarino forgot to mention, that he voted against codifying the ACA in New York State, which means that thousands, tens of thousands of New Yorkers would have lost health insurance. Luckily, his colleagues didn't think that way. So now we do have the ACA codified in New York State. I think that we need to protect and preserve the Affordable Care Act because it has saved millions of lives. We need to bring down the cost of prescription drugs and work to make sure that there are protections for folks with pre-existing conditions. We should expand the Affordable Care Act and provide public options as well.
Thank you. Mr. Berger?
When it comes to healthcare, we need to guarantee universal healthcare for every human being on American soil, making sure that members of Congress are on the level with someone having not even a penny to their name, not allowed to buy additional healthcare insurance. That's how we might make sure that it's good healthcare. Our current system is the most expensive per capita in the world, while 36 other countries have a longer average life expectancy. That means that this program should save Americans money while improving our health. The only losers in this deal should be big executives and shareholders of big insurance and big pharma. These ghouls have been making themselves rich by extorting the American people. I, for one, will have no sympathy for them.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Gordon, how can the federal government help to prevent climate change from destroying the future of Long Island?
So first, I just want to be very clear. Climate change is real, and I believe the scientists. I remember coming home from my last deployment from Afghanistan in 2012. 2 weeks later, Superstorm Sandy hit, and we know that that's a result of our warming planet and changing weather patterns. And so what we need is to move towards renewable energy sources. And we need representatives in Washington who are going to prioritize climate change. Climate change is also a global issue. So we need to find our way back into the Paris Climate Agreement so that our nation can be a part of the global solution. And we need to make sure that we prioritize climate change. My opponent prioritizes being in the pockets of his wealthy insurance donors. So we need to make sure that representatives will make sure that the residents in the 2nd Congressional District are always the priority. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Berger?
Well, as I already mentioned, we've been championing the Green New Deal for the last 10 years, and it just hasn't happened yet because Greens haven't been able to get into office. We think that this is our year. If ever there was a year to show that everything that we thought was impossible before isn't actually impossible, 2020 is it. We need to make a massive effort to build out zero emissions electricity generation and to get off of fossil fuels, to stop all future fracking, projects, stop new drilling, just stop taking more carbon out of the ground and putting it into the atmosphere. You know, the first step to solving problems is to stop making it worse. Then it may, in fact, already be too late, because I mean, the Antarctic and Greenland ice sheets are expected to melt, and that will raise sea level. And when we find out exactly how much that is, you know, maybe we wind up needing to put up things like levees, like they have in New Orleans for the low-lying areas along our coastline. I mean, that's seriously expensive, and you know, it'd be better to just prevent that from happening in the first place if we can.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Garbarino?
Yes, thank you very much. Just to go back to the other question, for my opponents, either one of them that might not understand, pre-existing conditions coverage of it has been the law in New York State for almost 30 years, so it would have been impossible for me to vote against it. But I love the fact that they talk about public options, which equals Medicare for all, which means you don't get your private insurance, you don't get your union insurance that you bargained for. So, you know, I think it's obvious which ones people want here. But as for the environment, we have, as a country, we've actually lowered our carbon emissions over 7 out of the last 10 years. We're working towards that. I'm fully supportive of tax credits for renewable energy, such as solar panels and wind energy farms. What's going on there, and sitting on the Energy Committee in Albany, I've seen the technological advances for these solar panels. It's amazing what they can do. I think we also need to focus on using natural gas. Natural gas produces half the carbon emissions as other fossil fuels. As for the national or international issue, there are a lot of bad actors out there. We need to make sure that China, Russia, India are all on board, and they start making their efforts to reduce their carbon emissions, because unless they get on board, we could cut them out. We could cut our carbon emissions out completely, and it wouldn't do any good.
Thank you. Mr. Berger, this next question starts with you, and it's a little bit longer, so just listen and then we'll have the time start ticking. Many of the pollution problems with Long Island's aquifer system and the groundwater within it were caused by military production during World War II. The Navy and Grumman were responsible for the Grumman plume and have known about it for well over 40 years, yet little has been done to correct the problem. What would you do to make sure that they not only do not stop remediation activities, but that they increase them until the plume is no longer a threat to our groundwater and surface water?
Well, the original intention of the Superfund project was that the federal government would have the money to step in and do the cleanup work up front when it's as early as possible, because as you wait longer, the problem spreads and gets worse and gets more expensive to clean up. And that's exactly what we need to do, is to have the federal government just put the money there and be like, we're going to clean this up. We have some pumping and processing and things that we can do to address the problem. But New York State recently did an estimate, and if I remember correctly, it was something like the next 30 years worth of processing for that are going to cost something like $530 million, and it might take up to 110 years to remove almost all of it. The other big thing we need to do is if it's not already in the books to do this, we need to make sure that it will happen in the future, is that we need to hold the individuals responsible, the executives, the people who read these reports and did nothing. They didn't disclose them to the public. They didn't clean them up, 30 years ago when it was a lot smaller. It would have been a lot easier. Those people need to be held responsible and sent to prison for something like gross criminal negligence.
Okay.
That way we make sure that the cost of waiting has to be higher than the cost of taking care of it right up front.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Garbarino.
Thank you very much. In Albany, I've already worked with Assemblyman Saladino when he was up there, and the Governor Cuomo, to pass legislation to help address the Grumman plume and help clean it up. But the state doesn't have enough funds to do it. The federal government really needs to step in, to put more funding in to clean up, to clean up those sites, put wells in to clean that water. And that's what I talked about before when I talked about an infrastructure bill that is not just good for small businesses, it's also good for the economy. Part of that infrastructure bill that needs to be done, we haven't had one out of the federal government for a long time. It needs to, part of the focus needs to be on clean water, clean drinking water, sewers, and that's how we get the funds. The state and the counties, they want to clean it up. They just don't have the money to do it. If the feds come in with the money, the state and the county will jump on board and it'll be done. That's how we get it done. We got to put the money there. And it's got to be done right away. We have to focus on getting the wells in to clean up this plume. And we have to get the Navy and Grumman on board with it to help us, because they should shoulder some of the costs.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Gordon.
So my heart goes out to those persons that have been affected by the aquifer for 30 years. And we need to get that cleaned up. I think we need to have local, state, and federal environmental control agencies come together to really figure out what went wrong there, because that needs to never happen again. I would be more than willing to have a bill to make sure that we put stiff penalties on the responsible party, because that plume is growing at a certain, I think it's an inch a day. And so therefore the penalty should match the growth of that plume, because Grumman is not stepping up to the plate. In addition to that, I would also be willing to introduce a bill that offers a chain of custody, because just because companies move or sell their companies off to someone else, the responsibility of any pollution left behind should not just be left by the wayside with ratepayers holding the bag.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Garbarino, next one would start with you. What should be our country's immigration policy? And please comment on your position on DACA.
Well, I am completely supportive of legal immigration. I think people that want to get here and they want to come here, because this is the you hear about it. My grandfather's mother was an immigrant. She came over from Italy. She had 9 boys. They all had local grocery stores. A lot of people still talk about them. My grandfather had the Garbarino Brothers grocery store in Sayville. He started a business. He grew it. He was able to help my father go to law school. My father now has a business, a law office in Sayville. And now I've been a member of the state legislature for 8 years, and now I'm running for Congress. I'm going, our family and the American dream is we're going to go from being a family of grocers to possible congressmen in 3 generations. It's amazing what you can achieve with hard work in America. And I'm all supportive of legal immigration. As for DACA, I've said, and Newsday reported it this morning, that I support a pathway to citizenship. If people want to be here and they want to follow the rules and they want to work hard and pay taxes, we should want them here. We should want as many people here that want to live here as possible if they're willing to work and if they're willing to be a productive person of society. I don't find anything wrong with a pathway to citizenship for people who want to follow the rules and be here and work hard.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Gordon?
I am an immigrant. I came here when I was 7 years old. And for those persons who are not immigrants, when you are from outside of America, America is truly a beacon of hope, not with words. When you come to America, you can be better than anything else you were in your homeland. And it doesn't have to be war-torn homeland. My parents were regular middle-class folks in Jamaica, but they came here because they wanted a better life for their children. And now I'm standing in front of you as a candidate for Congress. That's the American dream. And so we have over 11 million immigrants here. We need to create a comprehensive immigration policy with a pathway to citizenship for dreamers, for DACA, for TPS recipients, so that they can all realize the American dream, just like I have.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Berger.
Well, on the subject of on immigration, I was appalled when I recently heard the stories of involuntary hysterectomies being performed at ICE detention facilities. That is something that, you know, according to the UN, that's in the same category of genocide, and that's something that we really need to investigate very thoroughly and prosecute. We can't allow that to happen. My grandmother was an immigrant from Germany after World War II. She was 16 years old when she came here, and my mother was an accountant and a teacher, and now I'm running for Congress. We definitely need to have a good pathway to citizenship with respect to DACA. We just make those kids into citizens already. They've been here. They didn't do anything. They didn't commit it. They were just kids when they came here. They didn't have any control over what they were doing. Let them stay. And we have a very low birth rate in this country lately. So the labor force is going to be shrinking unless we allow for more legal immigration. And also on the subject of border wall, that's just been an absolute ecological disaster, and we need to just get rid of that thing.
Okay, thank you. Moving on now, Ms. Gordon, this one is for you. Would you support any federal gun legislation? And explain your position.
So I was in the military for 29 years. 27 of those years, I was a military police officer. Assault rifles do not belong on the streets of our neighborhoods or the hallways of our schools. I believe in common sense gun violence legislation, universal background checks, red flag laws. The senseless killings that happen in our schools, the mass murders that happen in our schools and on our streets can be prevented. And so we need to institute common sense gun violence protection measures.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Berger.
I learned to shoot when I was 12 years old at a Boy Scout camp. I'm an Eagle Scout. I'm a mechanical engineer. I understand very well how guns work. I own guns. I enjoy shooting sports. I'm not going to be doing anything to compromise people's Second Amendment rights unnecessarily. The big problem is that most so-called assault rifle regulations are a problem in search of a solution. Like the New York SAFE Act bans a pistol grip on a rifle or a carrying handle. How does that make any difference with how many people die in a mass shooting? It doesn't. So why do we bother with that? It just makes no sense. Automatic weapons where they shoot multiple bullets with the same pull of the trigger, they've been illegal for a long time, and yeah, let's keep it that way. Those are weapons of war. We don't need automatic M16s on the street. But when it comes to AR-15s, it's the best-selling rifle in the United States for decades, and we keep trying to regulate them away with rules that make no sense. If somebody's got a good idea that actually makes good mechanical sense and will actually do something about it, I'm not opposed to that. And the other thing is, I am also a survivor of domestic violence. So when it comes to this subject of red flag laws, yes, I think we do need that. However, there needs to be a strict time limit on those to ensure that there's due process is observed. Something like you have 30 days and then you need a grand jury indictment to extend it until a conviction.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Garbarino.
Thank you very much. I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment. The focus needs to be on keeping the hands out of criminals, terrorists, and the mentally ill. When you pass most gun legislation I've seen, when you pass it, it's targeted at law-abiding citizens. Criminals by definition don't follow the law. They're always going to find a way around it. They're always going to, they're just going to do it. Specifically in the SAFE Act, there was a bill that said handguns, you could have 10-round magazine, but you could only put 7 bullets in it. The criminal is about to go rob a bank. isn't going to say, all right, I'm going to go rob this bank, but I can only put 7 bullets in my gun. No, they're not going to follow the law because that's what they do. Law-abiding citizens follow the gun. The focus needs to be on keeping illegal guns off the street. 90% of gun crimes are done with illegal guns. We need more funding for our local police to make sure that they can go out and keep these guns off the street. That's it. I mean, it's other than that, unless we can get rid of the illegal guns and keep them out of the hands of terrorists, criminals, and the mentally ill, nobody's going to be safe. That's the focus. The focus should be on keeping illegal guns off the street.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Berger, this one starts with you. Remember, this is addressed from your prospective new position on the federal level. Please explain your position on police reform.
The police in general started in this country as slave patrols and evolved from there. That history is still with us to a certain extent because we never really made a concerted effort to overhaul that. And I think we need to condition federal funding and matching funds and things like that on police departments making serious reforms to how they conduct policing and who they send to different emergencies. Like I was speaking about before, a person with a gun isn't always the best solution to every 911 call. Sometimes you make it worse. If you have a woman who's reporting a rape or a sexual assault or something like that, and she's not in immediate danger anymore, she doesn't need a big scary person with a gun. She needs a mental health counselor and someone who's going to help her get the resources she needs to move on with her life and also take the report down and do all of those things. But a person with a gun has no place there. So I think we need to do things to encourage reforms like that. I've also been active with Long Island United to transform policing and community safety, which is led by people of color to reform our local policing on Long Island and making sure that I'm paying attention to the voices of minorities because I know I'm another white man. I don't want to be the stereotypical white savior.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Garbarino, your position?
Thank you very much. First, I want to speak about, the issues that have that really have started this. What happened to George Floyd was unacceptable. It's a travesty, and those officers should be held accountable to the law. I mean, it was awful. But as a federal office, as a federal congressman, what I would like to focus on, I think our Suffolk and Nassau police and our New York City police are some of the best in the country, not just the country, the world. They go through so much training to become a police officer on Long Island. They go through, they take a test, they go through the academy, they do mental examinations. That's why we don't have what happened to George Floyd. That's why it doesn't happen here in Long Island, because they're properly trained to deal with those situations. If I could do something as a congressman, I would make the standards that we hold our Suffolk and Nassau and city cops to as a requirement for everybody else in the country. I am so happy to have the endorsement of every single police union from Nassau and Suffolk County and New York City for this race. I'm happy. I've always stood with law enforcement. I've always supported law enforcement. And you know what? I've always sat down and talked with law enforcement because you can't talk about police reform unless you're willing to sit down with the cops. Unfortunately, my opponent, when she was offered to sit down with both Suffolk and Nassau police on multiple occasions, did not. I don't know why she didn't sit down with the police. And I know they called her on multiple occasions, but she didn't do it. I'd like to know why, but I will always sit down with the police. I'll always sit down with anybody and talk an issue out. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gordon.
So just to be clear, I am the only person in this forum with law enforcement experience, and I am the only person in this forum with over 30 years organized as a part of organized labor as I was in a union. As I said, I was in the military for 29 years, and 27 of those, I was a military police officer. I raised my hand 11 times to swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. I spent 32 years in local parentes, taking care of my students. I spent 13 years with my top priority being public safety as a councilwoman in the town of Babylon. I brought Suffolk County PD into my school to work with my students. I brought Suffolk County police officers into my internship program that I run every summer to talk to my students. I support law enforcement. I am law enforcement. I bring law enforcement together with the community. And I'm a mom and I live here in the community and I want to be protected and defended by law enforcement. Unlike my opponent who drives a wedge between law enforcement and the community and then hammers it in so that there is a divide. We need representatives who will bring communities together, not tear us apart. We need to bring the united back into the United States.
Thank you. Okay, so this is Mr. Garbarino, your question. What is your position on federal troops being ordered into states or cities to maintain law and order?
Thank you very much for that question. But I just want to go back to the last one real quick. I was with, by the way, Ms. Gordon, thank you so much for your military service. I do appreciate it. I always thank all veterans, but I was with about 100 police officers before this tonight. And I'm not the only one asking questions as to why you refused to sit down with them. The 100 cops I was with tonight from Suffolk and Nassau County also want to know why you refused to meet with them over the past couple of weeks. And you talk about driving a wedge between communities. This past weekend, I was proud to be at a food drive with the First Baptist Church in Bayshore and the 3rd Precinct, bringing the community together. I was there, I donated food, and I stayed around. I spoke with the pastor, I spoke with the law enforcement officers that were there, bringing the community together. So that's my focus, meeting with police, meeting with the community. So again, I'd like to know why you refused to sit with them recently. But as for law enforcement, federal troops being sent in, federal troops, with what was going on nationally, where the mobs were being running and taking over police stations, taking over cities, setting up blocks. Of course, first, local government should be taking care of that, making sure that their people are safe, their constituents are safe, their residents are safe. But if they can't do that, if they need help, then through the request, of course, they should, if they're requested to come in, then federal troops should be sent in at the request of local governments if they can't handle it.
Thank you. Ms. Gordon?
I think the manner in which the federal troops were sent in, it was from the president. If federal troops are needed, I believe governors will request federal troops. That's the process that it's usually by. And so each state has their National Guard, and National Guard usually responds at the behest of the governor of that state. And if that governor feels that they need additional help, then they will ask the federal government for federal troops. And I don't know what the requests were, so I don't know. But I do have a point of order, Ms. Scott. Where are questions coming from? Is it only from the moderator, or are we answering questions from candidates?
Oh, no. The moderator, I'm the boss of this debate. So
thank you so much for that clarification.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And again, I would like to remind all the candidates that the 2-minute close is when you want to drive your points home. That's when you're doing your pitch to your constituents. And if you care to answer in depth some more, 2 minutes isn't very long, but husband your resources and make your closing statement a strong one, each of the three of you. Okay. All right, Mr. Berger, federal troops.
With regard to my opponent referring to dividing the police and the community, that's the opposite of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to unify the community with the policing to get our leaders to actually listen to the people of color in the community who feel like they've been ignored for generations and abused by the police excessively by the punitive war on drugs that disproportionately puts people of color into prison, not white people. And with regards to federal troops in law enforcement, they've got no business here unless they are invited by the state and local government. And especially when they're infringing on the First Amendment rights of peaceful protesters and making situations worse by bringing more weapons into the situation. Yet when there were white men who came and took over a state capitol building with rifles, the federal troops didn't come and stop them. It's only when it's Black people and people of color and those kind of people that our government steps in and gets violent against them.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to a different subject. This one starts with Ms. Gordon. What will you do to ensure the future of Medicare and Social Security? Are there any changes that you feel need to be made in order to do this?
I will fight to secure Social Security, especially, and Medicaid, of course. Social Security is not an entitlement. That word just annoys me. Voters and citizens have worked so hard to put this money away so that when they retire, they can live with dignity and in the manner in which they become accustomed to. So we have to make sure we secure that and then it doesn't become privatized. And I will work to make sure that happens. And Medicare and Medicaid, the same thing. We have to fight for that. And we have to, what I'd like to also see with Medicare is that the age be lowered to 55 with Medicare.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Berger.
So with regard to Social Security, yes, indeed, that is something that people have paid into their whole lives and definitely, they deserve that money. Unfortunately, the way it's actually structured is that the people who are paying into it now, putting money in, are paying most of the money for the people who are drawing it out. And with the coming generations being smaller, soon we will have more people taking money out of the Social Security program than putting into it, unless we allow for more immigration to enlarge our workforce and have them be legal here so that they are paying taxes and paying into Social Security.
Okay, thank you.
And when it comes to healthcare, with you mentioned Medicare and everything. I'm talking about universal health care. Most of the time people talk about that in terms of lowering the Medicare age to birth, basically giving everyone Medicare across the country, no matter what, so that if you are sick, you go to the doctor, you get help, and you walk out $0 poor for everyone.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Garbarino.
Thank you very much. Social Security, it's simple. People have been paying into it with the expectation they're going to get it back. That's something we can't take away from them. It's ridiculous. And I would vote against any suggestion to do that. People have paid into the Social Security system. They deserve to get that money back, just like they were told they were always going to get it. As for Medicare, it's one of the biggest things I hear about Medicare and healthcare overall is prescription prices. And one thing that Medicare can't do that is done through Medicaid, and I think it's something that would help lower prescription drug prices, is a state, through Medicaid can say, similar to what New York State does, is say, all right, pharmaceutical company, we're going to pay you this amount. We want the cheapest price for this drug. And if they work out a deal, they work out a deal. But all of a sudden, if an insurance company comes in and works with a pharmaceutical company and says, and they get a cheaper price, the state now takes that cheaper price. They either get the deal they make or a better deal. So that's something that is not in the law for Medicare. I think we should expand it to Medicare because it seems to be working with the state in New York State with Medicaid. And I think that that focus or doing that would be good and help lower prescription costs for seniors who are on Medicare. That is a great way that we do it in New York State under Medicaid. And I think it's something that that we should expand to Medicare.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Berger, this is yours. Do you believe systemic racism exists in our culture and or in our government? And what role can the federal government play either in reducing racism or increasing equal justice?
Well, thank you for that. Absolutely, the systematic racism exists. In fact, one of my college professors is famous for publishing the article that revealed that the bridges over the parkways of Long Island were made Robert Moses deliberately made them too short for buses to go under because he didn't want Black people to be able to live on Long Island. And at the time, white people were buying lots of cars and Black people couldn't afford them. So it worked even better than the racist redlining that he used to put white people in one town and Black people in another. And we still have a very segregated Long Island. There are definite pockets, especially by school districts. There are some that are much more white and much richer and have much better schools. And there's a lot that are more heavily minority and have less money, and their kids don't get the same quality of schooling. And that's just one part of it. Also, when it comes to the war on drugs, especially, I support full legalization of marijuana and expunging all criminal records for possession and sale, decriminalizing other drugs, and treating drug problems as a public health issue, not as a criminal violation issue.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Garbarino?
Thank you very much. I do not think America is a racist country, but I always think that there is room for improvement, which is why, as a member of the State Assembly, I've worked with Assemblywoman Bashad and other members of the majority to expand programs for MWBE programs to make sure that they can they have more opportunities. I've also voted for bills that have brought back additional funding for low-income districts, specifically school districts. There's a bill every year to bring additional money home for Brentwood, the Brentwood School District. I support that resolution every year. I do not think we're a racist country, but I think there's room for improvement. And I think my voting record shows that where I think there can be improvement, I've supported it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Gordon?
I do believe there are systemic structures that are racist. For example, Newsday just came out with an article about the 3-year investigative reporting of the systemic housing. Right here in this district that I will be representing after November, Levittown was one of the first suburban housing developments where it was in the codified in the, I can't think of the name, that said that they're not allowed to sell to Black people, which was government sponsored, and mortgages were given by the government, which is systemic. And so what we need to do is make sure on the federal level that there are more educational housing and educational opportunities for disenfranchised communities, because those things are the foundation of wealth and opportunity in America. And that's the only way all Americans will be able to realize the American dream.
Okay, thank you. The next question is yours, Mr. Garbarino. And this is very topical for this week. Please give your view of the role of the Supreme Court in our 3-branch system of government.
Well, as an attorney, practicing attorney, the courts are there to interpret the law. There's a law, and they're supposed to make sure. Like I think was it John Roberts said, Grace? They're the umpire. You know, they call balls and strikes. They're not there to write the law. They're there to enforce it through the courts. So the Supreme Court should not be creating law from the bench. They should be looking at what the law says and applying it to that situation. Not just the Supreme Court, but every court. That's what judges are supposed to do, and that's what we were taught in law school, and that's what I believe.
Okay, Ms. Gordon.
The Supreme Court is there for checks and balances. They're not there for enforcement. They're just there to make sure that the the other branches of government are functioning and just for checks and balances.
Okay. And Mr. Berger?
There's the unmute button. Just wanted to be clear that the reason for my previous answer with legalizing marijuana and ending the war on drugs is that it is disproportionately affecting people of color, not white people. I was recently hearing that white men have a 1 in 13 chance of going to jail in their lifetime, but for Black men, it's 1 in 3. It's absolutely crazy. In terms of the Supreme Court, I believe their function is to expand the promise of America to more people, to expand the rights, to make our people more free. Black men used to be 3/5 of a person. Now they're a whole person. That was a constitutional amendment. But the point is that things like that, our culture has over time expanded more rights to apply to more people, in terms of letting gay marriage and things like that. And just now the latest hot button issue is transgendered people and their rights. I think we need to just, the court is there to expand who gets rights and make us more free.
Okay. All right. This is the last of my questions, and this is could either be a softball or a challenge. You're all vying for a seat that had an incumbent and who chose not to run anymore, Peter King. He has been a fixture in Long Island politics, and his district, I think, was well represented. And I'm asking you, this starts with you, Ms. Gordon. What is there in Peter King's legacy that you admire and would like to continue? And I would prefer it not be personality, but more issue-oriented, achievement-oriented. And also, is there a direction that he was taking the district that you feel you would like to see go differently, should you be elected?
I'll start with the latter and then go to the former.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Congressman King voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act more times than not, time and time again. And I think that we need to preserve and protect the Affordable Care Act. I remember when I was in Afghanistan and I heard 2 colonels speaking, and one said to the other, we've been here 12 times and I don't know how much we've accomplished. And the other colonel said, well, we've only been here one time, one year, 12 times, because each time we change command, we start all over again. So we need to just work on expanding the Affordable Care Act, bringing down the cost of prescription drugs and ensuring protections for folks with pre-existing conditions. One thing that I loved that Congressman King cared about as well was the service academies. I actually sat on his nomination board for several years. I worked with him to choose who our next leaders were going to be at the academies. I looked forward to doing it, and I hope to continue to do as good a job as he had in that capacity with choosing our next leaders in our service.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Berger.
I'm not exceptionally well informed on the specific history of Pete King. I have generally been as polar opposite to the Republicans as it's possible to be, except for when it comes to some issues of gun control. Unfortunately, typically only Republicans have had that in the past, and Democrats have been all about, taking away Second Amendment rights. In terms of the specifics of this election, and the people ask me all the time about the spoiler effect, about splitting the left vote. The thing is, the Green Party has been fighting for ranked choice voting for an extremely long time. This would be a way where you could rank all the candidates in order of preference and would completely eliminate the possibility of spoilers. But the Democrats would rather weaponize the spoiler argument to say that Green shouldn't run because we'll split the vote. the Democrats control the Senate, the Assembly, and the governor's chair. They can pass any law they want anytime. They could give us ranked choice voting tomorrow if they want, although now it's a little too close to the election, but they could have done it 6 months ago instead of making it us get 3 times as many votes twice as often just to maintain ballot access and hiding that in the COVID-19 emergency bill.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Garbarino.
Thank you very much. There's just so many good things to talk about what Congressman King did, and it's pretty evident that he was a great congressman. He was elected 14 times, 28 years he spent in Congress, not to mention what he did prior. His support of the police and the military, that's something that I'm going to follow his footsteps in. His work on the Zadroga Act, he fought Republicans and Democrats on that bill to make sure our 9/11 first responders were protected and had the health care that they needed, they deserved for what they did on that day and the weeks after. When Peter King stops to talk about the Zadroga Act, people listen. What he did was just amazing, and that's not the only thing that he did. When he bucked his own party, he worked across the aisle. He did what was right for Long Island. That's what Congressman King always did, and that's what I will always do. It doesn't matter if it's good for Republicans, it doesn't matter good for Democrats. If it's good for the constituents of the 2nd Congressional District, it's good for us. But specifically, I was walking with him today in Massapequa Park, talking to people, and somebody came up to us and talked about something he did for them 20 years, or he did for his parents 20 years ago. The constituent service that Congressman King has been able to do has been amazing. Whether anybody that called his office, he took care of it, and I've heard it on multiple occasions. It's something I've done in the state assembly, and I'm going to continue to do and follow his lead on that as well.
Okay, thank you very much. At this point, we'll go to the closing statements. We're going to do it in the same order we did at the beginning. So Mr. Berger, you would close first, 2 minutes, then Mr. Garbarino, and then Ms. Gordon. Okay.
Thank you. Once again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this gathering and the voters watching at home for taking the time to be well informed about all of your choices for Congress and for the other candidates for sharing the stage. I'm inviting all the viewers to join me in this fight. Sign up for my email list so we can keep in touch. Also follow us on social media. All the details for how to do that are on my website, burgerforcongress.com. Back in college, I was in the ROTC program for 2 years until I decided that I don't want the story of my life to be about death, so I left. At the same time, I also said no to designing machines that only kill people. Now, for a mechanical engineer on Long Island, that meant passing off a lot of job opportunities, including the ones that paid the most. That just shows you that when I decide on my principles, I stick to them, even if they cost. If you don't do that, how can you call them principles? And while I know that times are difficult for all of us, I want to reiterate that mine is a people-powered campaign. Since I don't take the corporate gray money, I very much need your support, both financially and in volunteering as we ramp up spreading door hangers and lawn signs, phone banking, and buying advertisements. Also, since the Republicans have held this seat for so long, if they manage to hold on to it, they don't gain anything. They just keep what they already have. But if we can actually spoil this election, that would be the only thing I'd like better than spoiling this election would be to actually win it, because that would give the Democrats the selfish best interest to give us ranked choice voting, which would improve democracy and allow you to have more choices on your ballot without worrying about spoilers. I'm line E on your ballot. So are Howie Hawkins and Angela Walker for president and vice president. Your vote for them is especially important this year because the Democrats suddenly changed election law in New York so that every party needs to get 2% of the vote or more for president and governor every time to stay on the ballot. That's 3 times as many votes, twice as often compared to the system that was in place before. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berger. Mr. Garbarino, your closing statement, please.
Yes, thank you. I really want to thank my opponents for joining tonight, as well as the league for putting this on. I really enjoyed it. But I think the choice is clear for this election. If you want the candidate who's pro public safety, who has repeatedly voted to combat MS-13, who's repeatedly voted to increase penalties on sex offenders, who's repeatedly voted and made motions to repeal the disastrous bail reform law that was passed last year in New York, and still doesn't support it and doesn't want to see it on a federal level, someone who stands with the police and supports them, then the vote, you vote for me, not for the person who makes a point of order when asked why they didn't stay with the police. If you want to vote for the candidate who has voted to lower taxes, to make the 2% tax cap permanent in New York State, someone who believes that lower taxes are for individuals are better, for businesses are better, then you vote for me. Or you can vote for the person who's voted to raise taxes and give themselves a pay raise. Don't believe the lies on TV about me opposing pre-existing conditions. Like I said before, coverage of pre-existing conditions has been the law in New York State for 30 years. I voted against a budget bills that included cuts to hospitals, Medicaid, and had the bail reform bill in it. I have a very pro-healthcare record. I have voted to expand coverage for cancer screenings. My aunt is a breast cancer survivor, and I voted to lower the screening age for breast cancer screenings. I'm very supportive of healthcare, very supportive of the environment. When I was first nominated to run for the state assembly, my mom came to me and she said, "Andrew, I'm so proud of you. Just do me one favor, do the right thing, and always do the right thing." And that's what I've done over the last 8 years. I've always voted the right way, what I thought was the right thing. And I've been able to produce for my district. And I'm going to continue to do that when I'm in Congress. If it's good for the people of New York 2nd, I'm going to vote for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Garbarino. Ms. Gordon, your closing statement, please.
Thank you, my colleague candidates, for this robust conversation, and the League of Women Voters for having me, and for all the viewers that are out there. Since I'm 20 years old, until and including this conversation, I have served my community and my country selflessly, with honesty and integrity and intestinal fortitude. And I would be honored if you would allow me to continue that service as your representative in Congress. I will fight for affordable health care, accessible health care. I will fight to bring down the cost of prescription drugs, ensure that you have pre-existing conditions. I will fight for the veterans here on Long Island. I will fight for climate change to ensure that the next superstorm Sandy does not devastate us like it did the last time. My 29 years in the Army, I always told my soldiers, whether the battle is lost or won, the soldiers must be fed. And now the residents of the 2nd Congressional District will now be my soldiers, and you will always be fed. Thank you.
Thank you to the candidates for attending tonight's forum, and the League thanks you for your service in running for public office. And thanks to our viewers. At this point, we'd ask the candidates to please turn off their video. And thank you again. For the viewers of this forum, please remember, there are 3 ways to vote this year: by absentee ballot, by early voting, October 24th through November 1st, and on Election Day. There is no voting on November 2nd. Check out vote411.org for the League's online voters guide and a bevy of information on voting, including a personalized ballot and location of your polling places. Thank you again. Thank you for the League for this opportunity. Thank you to my timer, Judy Temkin, and good night.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. Good deal. Thank you. Good. Nice job.